You guys, this is our last online leadership meetup before the festival and before the summer break. And I'm very excited to see you here today. Before the festival, what I mean is for those of you who don't know, Leadership Festival is happening in 12 days, in just 12 days in Warsaw. It's super exciting. And it's going to be all things related purpose-driven organizations. So we're collecting experts and most of all business people from around the world who are living purpose-driven organizations and asking them, how did you get there and how are you doing it on the everyday basis? And we're hoping to inspire each other, learn together, and expand the field. We're hoping to push the field from pioneers to early adopters because we feel the time is just there. The time is right. So today, just like in our other online leadership meetups, we would like to first check in with everybody and see what it is that brings you here today. And then Chris and I would have a conversation, a little bit of an interview and a storytelling. And we would like to reserve something around 20 minutes at the end of the show for your questions. So if you're sensing like, oh, I really want this guy to tell me a little bit more about this or that, I want a precise answer there, let's go back somewhere. Then just keep your, record your questions. We will have time to go back to them. And then we would be checking out to a lovely evening with everybody. So Chris Cusack joining us from London, originally from the States. Chris is working with an organization that's called Village Capital. And what I would say, you're from the movement of reinventing not only venture capital, but reinventing money as well. And it's very great for us to host you here today. We had the great pleasure of having a conversation last week. And it was a very brief one, and I had an impression of a very deep time that happened during that conversation. You know how sometimes you have a conversation with someone of half an hour and you have this impression wow, the whole world has been here 3 times around. So Chris, great to have you here.
Oh, thank you for having me. I'm part of this.
Yeah. All right. And guys, the question to start with for everybody, and let's just go in a circle and check into the circle, is what brings you here today?
I'll start. Hi, I'm Alvina. I'm from Germany, and I will be at the Leadership Festival. And I have basically no clue what this, I had no idea what to expect from this call, but I just sort of wanted to get a feel for who's in the field, who's in the, what kind of people show up at the festival or in the space around it. And just kind of get a feel and taste for that.
Great to see you here.
Thanks.
And my name is Kasia. I'm coming from Poland, and I'm also joining the Leadership Festival. And Karolina, you've just made it very real, saying it's just 12 days for the festival to start it.
No.
So I really can't wait for that. And I'm here because I work in IT, so I have got a lot of do with traditional VC, and I'm really interested in whole idea of village capital, and I really can't wait for that and to hear more today.
Oh, Maya, we can't hear you.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yeah, way better.
Okay. I'm Maya, I'm from Slovenia, and I'm here because the festival is happening, as Karolina said, in 12 days. And I'm just being overly excited to see, like both of you said also, to see what's in the field, who's in the field, and what can we all bring together and get out of it.
And I'm I'm here because I can't come to the Leadership Festival, but which I'm really sorry about. I mean, and I wanted to meet you all and meet more people who were involved in this. I love what Carolina and team are kind of building with this festival. And although I can't make it, I wanted to at least get to know the people who will be involved. I think it's a fascinating idea.
You know what we're saying, Chris? You can't make it this year.
I'm on the schedule for next year.
Exactly. That's the crazy thing. We haven't had the festival yet, and we already have a list of speakers for the next year. That makes me very happy and very excited for the next year, and thinking like, God, oh God, it's going to be a difficult choice, even more so next year. And I'm very happy also discussing village capital and venture capital and things related to money in the subject of purpose-driven leadership, because this is what we experience that makes it real for many people. This is where we experience that people who maybe are not interested in the people subject, you know, when they hear money, their eyes spark and they go like, oh, that's happening, like that's actually happening. I need to be paying attention because it's going to be happening to me otherwise. So I'm very happy inviting this aspect to the field as well, and I find it really amazing what you guys are doing. So I'm not sure if everybody had the chance to read the description of Village Capital. So maybe we could start, Chris, with you telling us what Village Capital is doing and how your guys' work relates to purpose-driven organizations.
Sure. No, and so I'm happy to walk through kind of who we are and where we've come from. But thank you again for having me. I appreciate the opportunity, and please stop me with questions. You don't have to wait until the end. More than happy to answer things whenever they come up. But so Village Capital exists to democratize entrepreneurship and to make access to building a company that, especially a company that solves an important problem in the world, available to anyone around the world. And right now we see when it comes to venture capital and kind of the industry we're in, we are a venture capital firm. We see most money going to Silicon Valley, New York, and Boston. That represents 75% of the venture capital money in the US and 50% of the venture capital money globally goes to just those three states in California, New York, and Massachusetts. And so regardless of where you are outside of those three regions, it's difficult to build a business. But again, that's one thing if you're in London, and it's another thing if you're in Warsaw. The difference is even more stark. And so, I mean, we exist to empower entrepreneurs outside of those typical hotbeds. And so we invest capital at the early stage between $50,000 and $500,000 at a time, with the goal of helping new business builders get through what Silicon Valley calls the friends and family round of financing. Most people have to raise $200,000, $300,000 from their own friends and family before they can go approach a venture capital firm. That has never made any sense to us. We never had friends and family who could give us that kind of money. We wish we could have, but I think our experience is more similar to the rest of the world. And so that's who we set out to support in business building. And so,
you know what, you just remind me of a quote I read once that said, entrepreneurs are just kids of rich parents. You know, this is what allows you to be an entrepreneur. And what's with the rest of us? Yeah.
No, and I mean, I think that's true even in a place like Silicon Valley, where it seems like everybody gets money to build a business and they get millions of dollars before they have any revenue. And, you know, that's the perception. But it's really only a specific type of person. It's generally a white guy who looks like me who went to Stanford who gets that money. And that's great for those people, but it's really bad for the rest of the world. And that's, I think, why we see so many companies raising money are building, whether it's food delivery apps for wealthy people in cities, they're building consumer technology for people who are well off and live in well-connected places. And so this isn't just about the people who don't have access, but the problems that we're solving are not problems that most people focus on every day. And so when we invest in companies that are tackling problems really in two broad sectors. And that's basic access to economic opportunity. And so that's healthcare, access to education, and financial inclusion, fintech. And then the second broad bucket is really around sustainability and climate change. Despite the U.S. pulling out of the Paris Climate Agreement, some of us still believe that climate change is a real thing, and we invest in companies that are addressing those problems. And so it's a good time to be outside the U.S. So I'd say that's a bit of an aside, but and so that's we invest around the world. The U.S. I say around the world, really concentrated in India, the U.S., Mexico, and Central America, and East and West Africa. And so those are our primary hubs. We have teams in those places. I've been coming back and forth to Poland in large part because we're really interested in the market, and we'd like to start making investments there down the road. And so we're just really exploring kind of our options in Europe. We've never had a team here before. So
I just had a conversation the other day with mentoring for startups that connects startups in Africa with mentors in Europe, Pact, and they have heard about you as well. So they
great. All right, that's good to know. But yeah, so that's the basic outline of what we do. I think when you ask about purpose-driven organizations and how we relate, I think we are a purpose-driven organization. We exist for a different reason than most venture capital firms, and that are we want to make money, and we invest in businesses that we think will deliver a financial return. But we also believe in this mission of investing in people who otherwise wouldn't get the chance to start a business, wouldn't get the chance to build a business. And that's our primary goal. Is most of the time that gap in capital, that gap in access to entrepreneurship is only because of the early capital. You don't have the 30 or the 50,000 to start a business. And so you just don't ever start the business because you can never get that early capital. Whereas we think if we can provide that early capital, they'll be able to go raise from traditional venture capitalists and really get into the mainstream down the road. And so that's really what we're hoping. And all of our companies are driven by founders with a vision to create an impact in their field, whether it's access to finance or better education for young people, or it's a world where that's not run just on or limiting carbon emissions. All of our founders are driven by some purpose, some driving kind of light in their lives that push them to start a business, and that's really who we try to support.
And is VailCap's purpose, is it the democratizing entrepreneurship, or is something different your purpose? How would you call it?
No, I think that's the right phrase to use. That's our mission statement. That's what we kind of exist to do, is really broaden access to entrepreneurship to anyone who has the background, the quality to start a business, and not just people who are born into the right neighborhood or the right family or go to the right school.
You know what? I'm just supporting a company in finding their new purpose. They are uncovering their actual purpose. They had an old story, and now they're going to a place of new story, and we're using purpose as their compass to align their decision and energize their actions. And I'm wondering, how did you find your purpose? How did you come up with it? Where did you find it? How did you know it was the right one?
Boy, that implies that I figured all that out. And I don't necessarily think I have.
It's okay to say there was a portion of magic on there. Then there were the 2 weeks no one knows what happened, and then we were there.
No, it's funny. I think a lot of that personally for me happened, subconsciously. It happened without me realizing that there was a narrative thread that kind of follows me throughout my career, which is really around helping companies in places that are often overlooked. And so before I was with Village Capital, I was in a very different industry on the surface. I was working for a professional basketball team. But really we were focused on economic development around downtown. And it was the Cleveland Cavaliers, and Cleveland's a city in the US that was huge in the early 1900s because of the auto industry. And since then, steel and all the different industries that once supported it have gone away. And so a town of 900,000 is now about a town of 250,000. And there's a lot of urban decay. And so we were trying to take some of those old abandoned buildings and turn them into places that startups wanted to come work and people really cared about. And so that was how I got into Village Capital. But I wouldn't have necessarily said that the reason I joined Village Capital was was necessarily tied to that purpose. At least it didn't feel like it in my mind, but I think that's certainly the common thread.
And do you know how the company found its purpose? How did they come up with it, or when it happened in their history?
Yeah, so Village Capital, we're about 8 years old as a company. I joined about 3 years ago, and so I can tell the founding story as I know it, but it's not necessarily my story to tell. But we were founded by someone who worked at a venture capital firm. Our founder's name is Ross Baird. And Ross was working at a venture capital firm focused on impact investments. And so it was a family office that was really designed to help invest the family's money into companies that were creating a social impact. And what they found, what they really wanted to do, he'd been an entrepreneur himself. He'd started four organizations by that point. And he saw this problem from the entrepreneur side, which is, you hear a lot of investors who say, well, we want to invest, but go make more progress and then come back to us. And then that same investor has to evaluate thousands of startups every year, but they can only invest in 5 or 10. And even though at his organization, they really wanted to invest in more, the process was broken. The process that they had in place forced them to spend so much time reviewing applicants and applications that they couldn't actually get to the number of investments that they wanted to do. And so he started Village Capital with this idea that instead of having investors, one investor or 2 investors sit and evaluate 1,000 different companies, he could bring together groups of startups who could evaluate each other and create investment decisions based on that evaluation. And so that's how that was the concept on which we got started, which is very similar and pulled from the village banking concept in microfinance, which is basically in microfinance became popularized as they would give small loans within a community, and the community would decide who is most creditworthy and who is most likely to pay that loan back. And any default by that person who the community nominated would cost the community the ability to get future funding. And so it was this village banking model meets venture capital is how Village Capital came to be. And so when we work with entrepreneurs and when we make our investments, we do so based on the entrepreneurs and how they recommend we invest our money. And so
that's how this process looks like, so yeah. I'm representing a startup and then I apply to you. How does the application look like? How many people come together for which period of time? I can see Kasia going like, yeah, so if you could just take us on that journey, if you could.
Sure. So our startups end up applying to us like they'd apply to an accelerator, basically. So we look very much like a startup accelerator in that we work with 10 to 12 companies at a time, typically, and those we choose out of a pool of applicants. And so the process hasn't totally changed from what Ross experienced before, but we do need to, we want some quality control when we get companies in the door. And so we work with 10 to 12 companies at a time, all within the same sector, or all addressing a similar set of problems. And so we'll run a program, for instance, focused on education, say, and not only education, but companies that are making it easier for 14 to 18-year-olds to access the workforce, basically. So job readiness types of companies, there are lots of them now. And so we try to get very specific when we build our programs. And so those 10 to 12 companies will come on about a 4-month journey with us, a 4-month process in which we'll run a series of workshops designed to help them think about investment readiness, help introduce them to the people that they need to grow their business over time, regardless of whether or not they get money from us. We think, we talk about financial capital being a barrier to grow a business. A lot of that is also what we call, social capital, which is really, do you know the people who can help you either raise money or connect you to your first customers or help you really think through how the business should look? Most people don't have anyone like that in their lives. And so we try to connect them with people that can be helpful. And throughout this entire process, the entrepreneurs are given we give them a framework we call the lens of the investor, to really look at each other's businesses in a way that's both objective, so it doesn't get personal, but objective and also relates to investment readiness. We've talked to hundreds of other early stage investors at this point, and so what we've come up with is a fairly standard rubric that walks companies through what they should be evaluating about each other. And then at the end of the program, they score their peers against this framework, and the top 2 scorers get investment from our fund.
Could they apply scores to themselves as well, or do they only give scores to the others?
They only give scores to the others. It's a good question. So you score everybody else. Yeah, no, it is. And we've run about 50 of these programs. So we've certainly found every way that an entrepreneur can try to beat the system. I think we're one step ahead, at least at this point. But no, it's a good question. So but the goal isn't just to support those 2 companies. I mean, obviously that's who we invest in. But we find that more than half of the companies coming through our programs raise money from someone they met through us, which is, I think, more important. I mean, we're trying to build an ecosystem. We're trying to build companies at scale that are investment ready. That attracts more funders into the space. That brings more money into this world, which I think is better for everybody.
And do these companies ever meet in the same physical space, or are all the workshops and meetings online?
They're actually all in person. So we do this all, each program is 3 workshops that are each about a week long, and they're spread out over 3 or 4 months. And so we will fly the companies in, and then so they can spend the time together. I think for that peer review process really to happen, it's hard to do online. We've experimented with it in different forms, and it's never quite produced the results that that an in-person meeting does.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of also this interpersonal dynamics that is just way easier or way more complete when it happens in person.
Yeah.
Yeah. And could you tell us, because I think like this practice, like this process of selection and having the applicants vote themselves whose company will be funded is one of the examples of the practices that support you in living your purpose. Could you tell us some other of your everyday practices that you live in your company?
Yeah, no, I think I mean our core values as an organization are tied very much to the goals. I mean, to the goals that we have, as you'd expect. And I think one of them is the entrepreneur is first always. We work with a series of partners, and we work with whether it's foundations or other investors or other people, all around this space of entrepreneur support. And our mission again is to empower entrepreneurs to start companies at scale and create an impact. And it's easy to be distracted from that, and to support other groups and to put other people first. And from our perspective, the mission is always to put the entrepreneur at the center of everything we do and make sure our actions are serving them, and doing our best work to put them in front. When it comes to the other, I think some of the other values we have, I won't go through them all, but hospitality is another thing that's really important to us. And that's, I think, we often see around the venture capital world and across the entrepreneurship world, everyone's very busy and everyone's got lots of things going on, and people are very curt and kind of quick with each other. And hospitality is really important to us. Even if we can't support a particular entrepreneur because they don't fit one of the sectors, or they're too late or too early stage for us, most companies just get an email response back that says, "No thanks, we're not interested." And so our goal is really to be hospitable and to help wherever we can, even if it's not the core of what we can do with our programs. And so I think that's, I mean, recognizing that our purpose is bigger than the work that we focus on every day, and recognizing the purpose is about this whole kind of industry and its growth, because it is small, and, you know, whether it's, you call it impact investing or social entrepreneurship, you know, I think those are terms we generally try to avoid, because we're trying to blur the line between people who work for impact and people who work in the standard just for money way. And I think a separate term puts us in a separate world, and we end up so we try not to use those, but the goal being to kind of bring people together and to kind of be an evangelist for this work, no matter who we're working with.
Yeah, I'm also relating to this, you know, like there is this space in between, and I think occupying the space in between is such a great challenge, because it's so ambiguous sometimes and so undefined. And we, in our conversation, we had a short conversation about exactly supporting your team and supporting yourself also in working in these fields. So maybe this is a good moment for us to pass, Chris, to your leadership journey, and to Chris, you know the questions.
Fair. That's a good point. Yeah. I was, you made sure I was ready for this. But,
I didn't want to surprise you or jump at you. No, but I'm just thinking, because in our call, when we were speaking the other week, we were discussing how important of a task for you it is to support yourself and your teams also in working in this field you're working with all its ambiguity, and how difficult it is to be understood by family and friends. So yeah.
No, I mean, it's if I'd say 99% of the time when someone asks me what I do in a social setting, whether it's my family, a friend from university, whatever, my answer is always just, I work at a venture capital firm. And I don't like that answer because it doesn't get at the purpose of why I'm doing what I'm doing, or the core mission of who we are. But it's the easiest way to explain what we do in a shorthand form. And most people don't really care, and they're just kind of asking to be polite. But it's hard in that, you know, I've been at Village Capital for 3 years, and my parents still don't really understand what we do. It's foreign. I mean, the startup world in general is very different to, I think, our generation than it was to the generation before. And so, you know, just communicating what we do every day is difficult, and it's not something that most people, I think, understand. So I think because of that, the field has gotten very insular, and I think that's a bad thing. But that's not. We can table that. That's not the point of the question. But so no, I think when we talked about you know, talked about a little bit about leadership, I think one of the hardest parts is making sure that people who are new to our team feel like they can talk to someone else about the struggles they're going with, about whether it's communicating with their family about what they do, because I think most of us have family members that are still trying to convince us to get real jobs, you know, big, real jobs. And that's fine. And, you know, I think that'll never go away to some extent. And that's okay. And you learn to deal with that after a while, but it's really hard for some people. And I think it's been especially difficult for some of the people that work for me on my team. And so being attuned to that and being able to make sure that you're supportive of people as they make a transition into what feels like a crazy career to a lot of outsiders, because this is a new space. It's changing every year. There aren't that many organizations doing what we do, or even kind of around what we do. And so it's a lot about kind of listening and making sure you're there for people on a personal level, which is not what a lot of people talk about when it comes to business in general. A lot of people separate the personal from the professional, and I think that's great if that's your personality. I think it's really hard for that to be possible in work like this.
Mm-hmm. I can imagine, Malvina, that maybe you will understand that, because when I was talking to your colleague, Malvina's colleague Martina was a guest at the first online leadership meetup that was on holacracy. And one of the things we discussed was that many holacracy practitioners really would wish there to be a competitor for them. Someone who offers something as complete and scalable as holacracy offers to organizations. And that's I know it's the same thing for you with Village Capital, that you would like to not compete with other venture capital organizations or companies, but would like to compete and just have the game rolling, the ball rolling with other organizations developing the alternative. Do you see any alternatives happening that would be similar to yours in the world?
I mean, to start, I mean, you're absolutely right. I think we're in a unique position when it comes to business, in that we're actively trying to convince more people to be competitive with us, which is rare. And something that feels a little bit funny still. But, you know, when we put in $50,000 into a company, or $100,000, that's very often not what they actually need to grow their business. You know, maybe they need 300 or 400,000 or even $1 million. And that's not something we can provide all by ourselves. And so the way this works at scale is for there to be 5 of us, 10 of us, 20 of us competing for those same investment deals. What drives Silicon Valley is, you know, every time there's a great company, 30 firms, it's equally competitive on the VC side trying to get into that deal as it is for the entrepreneur trying to raise money on their side. And right now there just isn't that in our space. And so there are lots of different organizations that are doing, I think, good work and trying to invest more and be more involved. We haven't had anyone try to copy our model. In fact, we've been actively trying to get other accelerators and funds to adopt it. We've kind of open sourced our materials. We had 26 organizations around the world start Village Capital style programs in their own local areas last year. And we're excited about that. We want more people to do that. And we have a team that wants to be helpful to them. But for now, we don't see, I mean, I think a lot of our direct competition comes from angel investment groups and other kind of early stage, whether it's foundations or other people, and not very many VCs. But people who are in this a bit more recreationally tend to be our biggest competitor.
And when you're talking about building like an ecosystem, a landscape, an ecosystem around this concept of democratizing entrepreneurship, and you're mentioning building up a strong community of startups that are applying for your support, and this community obviously is growing, and then you either invest in them or not. But I'm wondering, do you already see also like the next stage investors showing up and showing interest in who succeeds in your program?
Yeah, so we've had some great, I think, success stories when it comes to raising more money beyond us. I think we're very much just the beginning in a longer chain. So we've had a company, just to give a few examples, a company called Simpa Networks in India, which provides off-grid solar, kind of small solar panels to families and communities that they can kind of install and pay for using their phone. And so they've been installing these all over India. They've raised money from, at this point, they've raised about $30 million from different sources, both government and kind of traditional investors. And we were, if not, I think we were the first money into that company 6 years ago. And so that's, I mean, one example, but we've seen a connection, which we're excited about, between our companies as they grow and some very traditionally minded, non-impact focused firms. I think for this to work, those VCs have to really understand that there's money to be made in impact. And so we're trying to speak that language, not because we don't care about the impact, but because we're just trying to merge the two.
You want the impact to have a true impact, yeah.
And we want real scale. I think lots of people talk about social enterprise and they really mean a nonprofit organization or an organization that has to rely on some form of subsidy to exist. And that's great. And there's definitely a place for those organizations to exist and to be really impactful. But that's just not our focus.
And the last question from the questions I had prepared and we briefed each other about. So the rest of you already, you sense it. You can start shooting with your questions in just a second. With the Leadership Festival, we call it this year Emerge, because we want to see what emerges in the field, what's showing itself up. We want to collectively look at what's happening and collectively make sense of it and give it a language so we can communicate easier. Both inside and also out, like with those who are on the peripheries of the field. And I'm wondering, from your perspective, from Village Capital's perspective, what do you see is already emerging in the field of new business or new work or new economy?
Boy, I mean, there's a lot, and I think there's a lot that's good. It's a very fast-moving industry, and that, which is exciting, and that lots of people are trying a lot of new things. And I think you see. Really, I mean, when it comes to building new economy, there are a ton of great organizations that are really kind of building new initiatives and trying new things. I would say one that has a better scope than almost anybody in building the new economy is a group called the Dune Foundation, which is based out of Amsterdam, but they fund initiatives all over the world focused on the new economy and then green energy. And so they're a foundation, so it's more their grantee list and kind of who they support. But they're one of the most prolific grant-making organizations around the world focused on the new economy. So I think what they've built in terms of an infrastructure and a grantee pool is really interesting. In terms of specific projects, I can speak to one thing that we've been focused on lately is trying to create a common language between entrepreneurs and investors. I think if I'm an entrepreneur and I say I'm early stage, and an investor says I invest in early stage companies, that term actually means very different things to those two people. And that causes huge problems when it comes to fundraising, and then both sides get frustrated with each other and no one's happy. And so we've been building this tool called VIRAL, which stands for Venture and Investor Readiness and Awareness Levels. It's a bit of a mouthful, but VIRAL was a good acronym, so we stuck with it.
Creating impact.
Hey, look, I have to be honest about that part. But no, so and it's really designed to give entrepreneurs a series of levels and a series of milestones that they need to hit to think about raising the kind of money that they want. And so what that helps with is it's based on our conversations with investors. So investors can say, well, I only invest in a VIRAL level 5 company. And then the entrepreneur knows, well, okay, I'm not there yet, and these are the milestones I need to hit, and this is where I need to focus to get there. And so creating that common language is something we see a big need for. But I can probably go on too long about other groups and other initiatives. And
that actually, language is one of the key tools for progress, actually. And where is the scale available? Where can people find it, and who else except of you is using it?
So I can I'll have to send you, if I can email you a link. You can all access it through that. And then in terms of who else is using it, we have about 30 accelerators around the world are using it in their own work. We have about it's a combination of investors and accelerators, and companies are using it. We're building an online tool, over the next, we hope 6 to 12 months to put it all online, to make it open to any entrepreneur anywhere. So we're building that out now. We're not quite done yet.
So I know what you bring into the festival next year.
It'll be perfect timing. It'll be ready to go next year. And we actually just publicly announced this yesterday. So it's really a brand new tool for us that we're starting to publicize and get other.
Congratulations! I think it's going to be really helpful.
Well, thanks. I hope so. But if you don't think it is, or if you think there are areas we can improve on it, I would love to know. We're going to
spread it. If you share the link with us, we're really happy to spread it. And I think we have quite a couple of projects in our community that would be fitting your description and would be really interested to test it as well. So I'm going to comment it to them. Yeah.
Well, thank you.
Yeah. I'm thinking about this, one project that's trying to reinvent education and is, very hopeful and taking a bus on a spin around Europe, talking to, people. All right, so like I promised, it's time for your questions, our dear audience. So what would you like to know? Where would you like to follow up on?
Chris, that was amazing. Really, I'm really into the idea. And I have a question. How long do you actually follow up with the companies? Is it just one-time funding, or do you follow the company down the road?
It's a great question, and it's an important question because I think, when we talk about the need of companies at that early stage, it's very often not just capital. The money helps, but the money only shines a spotlight on all the issues that the business has to deal with. And so we stay very involved. We have a small team, and at this point, 75 investments and 600 program alumni around the world. So I can't say that we check in with all 600 of them on a daily basis, but our fund is really involved with the 75 that we have from a portfolio perspective. And we're also building a few tools to help all 600 around a few issues that we see are common tools or common to all these companies. And one is building a team. I think we say the biggest problem a startup has is capital until they get the capital, and then it's the team. It's who do they bring on, who do they hire, how do they find the talent that takes them from a pre-seed or a seed level company through a Series A or Series B, to use investment terminology. But and so I think so we built a few tools, particularly for emerging market programs, in Mexico, East and West Africa in particular, to help companies think through how they can hire. And I apologize, a couple of sirens going by me outside, but how they can think through hiring, how they can better recruit and source talent. I think the biggest problem we see is that most companies don't realize how long it takes to bring on someone great. And by the time they think about it, it's too late. And so if you haven't identified who you want to hire before you raise the money, it's too late. You've missed your window, and you won't be able to get truly good people, unless you're really, really lucky, but that's not something you want to count on. And so that's a tool we help all of our companies with. When it comes to the 75 that we've invested in, we do make second investments in some of those companies. But also, I think more of what we do is try to connect them with an institutional investor who's a little bit bigger than us, that can take them through the rest of their life cycle. So we try to get them ready to approach a traditional VC, whether it's Sequoia or Andreessen Horowitz or any of the other big ones. And then that company, we hope that group will come in and invest, and then help them out through the rest of their cycle.
Can you talk a bit more about what other issues you see in those early startups that only get sort of highlighted by the capital? I'm interested what the patterns are that you discover there.
Yeah, I think it's one of those things. Every small issue with a startup becomes a big issue after you get some money. And so, it's because I think the thing companies don't realize is how quickly their life changes right after they raise money. Because all of a sudden, before you raise money, you can stop whenever you want. If you're a founder of a company, you can quit. I mean, if you have a team, you're letting them down, but it's often a very small team, and it's either the co-founding group or you have an escape hatch basically that you can take before you raise money. After you raise funding, you don't really have that anymore, and you've really committed to that business for the next 3, 5, 7 years. Really, at that point, 5 to 7 years, and that's kind of if you're lucky. And so I think we get some entrepreneurs who, and on a more of a personal level, raise money and then realize the commitment they've made after the fact. And a lot of people, especially on the tech side, are doing lots of different side projects and they're working on a lot of things. And maybe they ran with this for a little while because it seemed interesting, but they weren't really thinking of the implications of taking money to continue building that idea. And so we spend a lot of time with our founders before we put money into the company saying, I mean, really, is this something you want to do? And it's okay if the answer is no, but we really want to know now because, we don't want to find this out in 3 years. Because if you're burned out and you're trying to build a company or you decide you're not interested in the idea, it's hard enough to build a business when you're excited about it and focused on it 100% of the time. So we just don't see a lot of success otherwise. So I think that's, on the personal side, we see that a fair bit. On the actual company side, hiring is the big one. The next one is always, especially companies that are in the B2B world. So they're selling to other businesses. It's really hard. They always underestimate the sales cycle, what it will take to actually make their first couple of sales. Entrepreneurs are optimistic and that's great. And we love that for a lot of reasons, but that means that they often think they can close sales in 2 months that in reality will take 8 months or 10 months. And so when they're fundraising, they only fundraise for the next 3 to 6 months, thinking that they'll have all these contracts will come in and they'll be fine. But in reality, it takes longer. And so I think that's a big issue we see. But it's really that and team, I think, are the most common. And so, yeah, I could talk about other problems all day, but at least those are the big ones.
Thanks.
Yeah, of course.
Chris,
can I follow up on that still?
Yeah, absolutely.
If you want to go into detail, like how do you actually do that? How do you actually get a feel, like what you were saying about commitment? I mean, that sounds pretty, like vulnerable and personal. How do you, do that in a space where everyone is there to actually get something from you in a way?
It's really personal. There's no way around that. And that's, I think, part of why we really require our programs to be in person and not done online. A lot of this is done feeling people out over drinks after the sessions are over. This is stuff that we don't have a session around, do you actually want to do this? Because everyone, of course, would say, yeah, of course, we're all here. We all love this. This is great. But actually, this is why we rely on entrepreneurs to evaluate each other. Because other entrepreneurs can see someone that's burned out or not fully committed way better than we can, because they're in it and they're living that every day. And if they start trying to talk about problems and challenges, and that other person can't relate to it because they're only working on the company, 4 days a week, or they're not pulling the late nights and they're not, they're not struggling with the same sorts of things, that's a big red flag for the other founders. And so we often find out about it through that kind of evaluation process. We've never had a founder, we've had a lot of founders that we think are committed and we find out from the entrepreneurs that they're not, and the entrepreneurs are always right. And so that's just further validation of the system. But no, so we really do leave that in the hands of the entrepreneurs, and they're pretty good at finding each other out. And not in a malicious way. This isn't meant to be like, we got you, but really, we had one company that came through our program and looked great at the beginning of a workshop, and by the end, wasn't selected to receive the money, and they were really upset about it at the time. I ran into the founder about 6 months ago, and he said he'd moved on to another company and was really excited about that one. And he said, I'm so glad I didn't get investment from you. I'm so glad I got turned down, because I would have ruined the next 5 years of my life. I mean, I wasn't really excited about that idea. I just thought it was the only idea I would ever have that would be worth a business. And I think that's an important lesson for potential founders. It's very, you'll have multiple ideas. This isn't about the idea. It's about you and what you want to commit to. And so anyway, I'll stop there, but we rely a lot on the entrepreneurs to answer your original question.
And have you ever had a round of the entrepreneurs not select someone that was your company's favorite?
Oh yeah, that happens all the time.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh yeah. And sometimes, I'll say sometimes we're right and sometimes they're right. But more often than not, the entrepreneurs tend to get it right. And part of that has been, we've adjusted the process and the ranking system over time as we've gotten better at this, and we've kind of learned how entrepreneurs look at each other and their biases. But in truth, I mean, it's part of this is about really behavioral science and behavioral psychology, and that I think we've learned enough about, the science is pretty clear in that a single person making a quick decision is often relying on heuristics and often relying on their background, what they know, their experiences to inform that decision. And so that's why we think, 95% of venture capitalists are basically middle-aged white men. And 95% of venture capital goes to middle-aged white men. There's a real correlation there. And it's not because 95% of people who start businesses are white guys. But it's because when you're asked to make a quick decision, like most venture capitalists are, it's one person evaluating thousands of companies every year. You have to rely on some shorthand and some quick decision making. And it's not something that most of these people even realize they're doing. Not something most of any of us realize we're doing as we make decisions. But it's inherent in kind of everyday life within business and outside of it. And I think part of what we're trying to do is we really believe if you bring together a diverse group of people, they can make better decisions than one so-called expert. Even if they're not an expert in that field, we really think that if you give people the parameters and you bring together a diverse group, they overcome each other's individual biases to create a better decision. And so we're seeing some early signs of that in our portfolio. We have 40% of the companies we invest in are led by women, which isn't quite 50-50, but we're getting close, and that's the goal. Actually, the women-led companies in our portfolio are outperforming the male-led companies in our portfolio, which is another fun stat. And so we're getting there. I mean, it's a slow process, but we really do think that it's about just making more efficient decisions and less biased decisions.
And Chris, you've mentioned that for the programs you are choosing the companies that are in the same field. How do you choose the topic for each of the programs? Is it something that you come up with, or whether you're looking at the company, at the market and seeing what is there?
Yeah, it's a combination of two things, in that we'll look at companies from across, we have a team that's looking at education companies all year. And so they'll come to us at before a program starts, and they'll say, well, we think the best companies are in this subsector or that subsector. But then what we'll do is we'll bring together, we have advisory boards for our programs that are made up of both investors and people who represent more of the financial side. And also people who are, in the case of education, teachers, people who are running different schools, people who come from, whether it's the academic side of academics, so to speak, who really understand how to create an impact in the sector. And we bring them together and talk about the problems that are most impactful and most important that are facing the sector right now. And also the problems that they think startups are best able to solve. Not every problem is something a startup can take on, and that's okay. But we're trying to work with, obviously, the companies that are solving problems that they can solve. And so we bring those two sides together and ideally find some alignment that helps us structure the program.
I'm wondering if there's something we haven't asked you about and you would like to share with us? There might be a story we missed, and you're sitting on it.
I think I've been doing plenty of talking. I'm not sure I have anything specific in mind. But no, I think we've covered all the important parts from my perspective. But I hope this was valuable to you all.
I think you're good. Yeah. I'm just checking for the last round to see if anybody has any other questions you would like to share with Chris or with the round.
Well, and I'll say, please feel free to share my contact information. I'm always happy to answer questions and talk more about what we do, or point you in the direction of things you might be interested in based on anything I've said. Again, we're trying to build this field and help people who are interested in it get more engaged and more involved. And so, any way that you all want to get into the sector or learn more about it, I'm always happy to help.
All right.
I just want to share that I think that you're doing something really, really important. And when I'm thinking about like traditional VC, I imagine it as like a world where everyone is fighting for something, and you somehow you're making it purpose driven, and this is something really important, and I really admire the mission that you're bringing to the world. So thank you very much for sharing that.
Oh, thank you. That's very kind, and it means a lot. I mean, we're trying something new. I think we're still trying to figure out if it'll work. We're still early on in this journey, but we're hopeful, and we think it's important that more people try more new things, because the status quo is not, I think, what a lot of us want it to be.
I think here you've got a round that is probably more understanding than the majority of the world, because we're all into social innovation and we're all figuring out new ways of doing work, whatever work might mean for us. And I guess probably like the understanding for the living in the ambiguity. And not knowing what actually is a success and not knowing what actually is a failure, because you never know, was it a failure or was it just like you said, was that the right moment to get a no with this idea, to move on to a different idea that's actually your now destination and that feels way more right for you. So yeah, I would like to check out with everybody, basically following up, Kasia, on this, what you said, which would be a question of what is your strongest inspiration you're taking from today?
So for me, what you said, Kasia, resonates with me. Like I have the whole VC world is not my world. I know nothing about it. So I only have some sort of cliches and stereotypes to go on, and it's nice to basically get a glimpse of something that's very different. And then for me, like more specifically, I really like, Chris, what you said about that when you put money into something, that it basically just kind of the things that are already there grow, which means like including the issues, which is something I very much believe in on various levels. And yeah, that's something that's kind of still working in my head to hear that from your perspective as well. So yeah, thanks.
I am leaving today with this strong inspiration to map up the world, map up the world of the new, to like identify the sectors that the new is moving inside and just collect the information of where are the people that are doing great work, just to empower each other, just to see, just like you said about the foundation, the June Foundation, in Amsterdam. I mean, I talked to you, and then I talked to NPACT, and they knew you, and the June Foundation, just to collect that on a map of the world, so that if we're looking for solutions from that, these are the people we could talk to. I don't know how we could do that, but maybe we're gonna have a chance during the festival to sit down and see who together with me would be interested in creating such a sense-making map and a map of this new territory. So that's I'm leaving with an idea of a project, actually. Yeah, and I haven't had it before.
Well, good. There are certainly a few people who are beginning to do that in bits and pieces of the world that I can share with you that I hope will save you some time.
Here we go. Yeah, great. Maya, how about you?
I don't know. I'm still kind of all new to this. It's all very exciting. For some stuff, I have no idea what they are and what they mean. I guess I'll just have to do a little bit of Googling for myself. But it's all very exciting. So I'm just sucking in all the information I can get. Basically, this is where I am just now.
Well, if there's anything I can clarify later or follow up with you on, please let me know. Again, yeah, my email is chris@vilcap.com, and always happy to connect. And Carolina knows how to get a hold of me a few different ways if that doesn't work.
And Chris, what would it be for you? What was your inspiration today?
I mean, I think it's meeting you, and it's always meeting new people who are, well, Carolina, I knew you before, but kind of meeting everyone else and being in a group like this. I think it's always nice to see more people interested in this and wanting to be involved and wanting to help and really just being interested in the space. I think that's how we really, change the status quo and really bring this to scale. And so, I think, as you said, that's while this room is, I think, a little bit easier to convince of the value of kind of the work we're doing than most, that's okay. I think that's good. It's important to remember that there are lots and lots of people interested in this, even if it doesn't feel like it every day. Yeah. And so I think there's a huge value just in that for me, certainly.
Thank you for the work you're doing. Thank you for sharing with us. And I think it's just like Maya, you shared now, it's important to share your work, Chris, with the people who are not convinced of it, but I think it's equally important to share the work with the people who are convinced of the organizations that are purpose-driven, but maybe are not such experts in your particular field. And like that, we're really exciting to each other and bring in the new and stimulate and motivate each other. And I think that's fantastic. I'm very happy to say then good evening to Poland, Germany, Slovenia, and UK. I really love it always with those online meetups that we just have such a big diversity of Europe and often beyond as well. Thank you guys so much. See all of the participants of today's online meetup in Warsaw in just 12 days. Chris, see you on the next one. Yeah?
Absolutely.
Take care. Have a good evening. Thank you guys for your time.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye.